So I've been trying to put together a muscle up video for a few weeks now, and it's a little challenging just because what I'm trying to describe is really, really nuanced. I'm going to play through the video right now just so everyone can kind of see the two different muscle ups I'm going to show. The first one is sort of a float, and you're going to see that typically you fail right there. And the second one is a little more, it looks super similar, but what we're looking at is a hip whip. And I've tried to explain this a couple times now. We have a bunch of drills that show it better than I can explain it. But essentially what we're doing here with the float, you're going to see that there's still, you can have a great front swing, nice hollow, and you can have a great backswing, and it can still get pretty messed up. Now, so I'm clear, this is not a perfect backswing. This is a pretty good backswing, and that was not a perfect hollow that I had in the front, probably because I jumped into it. But this was really for demonstration purposes, so I'll go into that a little bit more. What you're going to see is that there's a flat rise, right? So I'm going to drive my hips, and then I'm going to keep everything the same. So you're not going to see my hips go up again, all right? That's actually a great, pretty decent hollow and a pretty decent backswing. A little shallow on both, okay, but they're not bad. So here you can see there's not going to be any hip whip up. I'm just simply driving and floating up, all right? I'm not throwing my head forward hard. I'm just letting my hips rise. So I'm only getting to here, all right? So this is my position, and this is what most people will look like. Most people being, pretty much everyone's doing a muscle up without a lot of extra training. It looks like this every time, and what they'll usually have is a bent leg of some kind. So the foot's coming down, that's the foot, that's the leg. The femur will be here, right? But what typically happens when those knees bend, and those knees usually start to go up, the hip then drops. So imagine this position, but with hips that are like down here now, okay, rather than up here. And I'm going to fail, like this is an actual fail. This is not me playing around. Like I'm trying to do a muscle up in this particular manner. I can't do it. All right, you're going to see there's a pretty, I'm pulling over. I went to the armpits, not totally, but I went to the armpits, right? Most of the things here are correct, and it looks pretty correct. Why didn't I make it? I didn't make it because there's no extra hip width, okay? So what I'm going to show you next is the one that I typically do, and the one you're going to see, I think, have the most success with as far as the efficiency behind it. There's certainly other ways to do this. I'm keeping my feet straight to demonstrate the hip whip better. I think when the knees bend, things get a little more confusing. So what we're going to see now, again, good, so really nice hollow, right? This is a good hollow. Arms are going back. All right, that's a good hollow. All right, we're going to punch the chest through. Now, this is a pretty good backswing. Maybe a little too much bend in the lower back, but, that's what it is right now. Toes come up. All right, I want you to see this. The toes are in front of the hips, and that's what we want. My toes get to the apex. This is where the apex is. I'm now going to drive my toes down, my heels down. This is the part that isn't happening in the other one. Watch what just happened. I'm flying over the rings now. I'm ending in pretty much that same position, but how much higher am I on those rings? Okay? So again, I'm going to show that backswing. We're going to come up into the nice toes leading. Whip the hips. Hips just flew up. I'm still pretty straight, right? But I've come back into that hollow position, and now I'm pulling into the armpits and flying over the rings. And I'm going to use, I believe in this video, I don't remember exactly. I think no, I'm sorry, I just end. Typically what I would do is I would use the backswing that's happening here. I would use this backswing to actually do the dip up. Okay, but this is really just for, again, this was like the best attempt that I had at showing these two different movements, and I'm trying to explain it to people that, like you, are super athletic, can do the movements generally, but really struggle when we add 30 muscle-ups into a workout, right? And why is that? Because if you start to float, I'm going to go back to the float. If you start to float and there's no extra whip in your hips, and this is what it looks like, you're not going up over the rings on that, whatever, 20th or 8/15th or whatever it happens to be. It's just too hard. So this is a good example of what we don't necessarily want to do in the float, in the muscle up. Clearly Emily's a really good gymnast and very good at what she does. This is one of those things where in some ways this is almost harder for people that are good at this stuff. You're going to see she has a really good backswing. You know, the front swing is broken from the get-go, so you know that makes it harder. I'm going to play this through. So she does, you know, one nice big backswing in the back. This may be a little bit, you know, a little bit loose. Not a big deal for someone who's small. As she comes through, one of the biggest issues is that this is getting left behind. So, and you know, if you watch this, you're like, well, that's not even a bad muscle up, right? But there's a few problems. This is a big problem. The hips are left behind. So the hips are already low, and the knees have already beat the hips up. She's gonna bring her hips high, right? But you're gonna see there's no difference from the bottom to the top. There's no point at which those hips whip. And the top, the apex of the movement, when everything is totally weightless, it's already starting to fall down, and those knees are higher, right? Before she's over that, or before she's over the rings, okay? If we look as we come up, it looks more like a sitting in a chair position than a hollow, right? And even though those hips do rise, and they're going to rise to about here, I think. Yeah, right about there. They start to break right as when she needs them to be at their absolute highest. And they already went as high as they can go, all right? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's no sort of reclosing of those hips, right? Here, those toes need to be up here, all right? And if the toes aren't up there and the knees are bent, which again, I said before, is okay as long as you can do it properly, you know, it'll be fine. But in this case, they aren't, right? So things aren't quite high enough, and then there's no whip in those hips, right? So let's watch those hips again. They just sort of float up, and it's still fast, right? There's nothing. It's not. I'm not saying it's not fast. I'm not saying that she's not making the muscle up. So this is not a super efficient way of doing this. And this is a pretty good one for her because she's a little usually slower motion on this stuff. This second one is a little better because she at least throws her head forward. But this might actually demonstrate the problem more because she's got a great backswing, and then those knees are coming up again. This is a little too loose, and those hips come up, right? But these are just loose from the knee down. Everything is sort of just along for the ride, and what needs to happen is those need to fire down, and then this needs to fire up. And rather than that happening, it just stays. It's pretty much a static position all the way through there, and that's that float that I was talking about that we don't really want, right? And she's still high, but look at how low those hips have dropped, right? And it's not because she's whipping forward; it's because she's strong and she's pulling over the rings. Get your hips down. Yeah, let's throw that foot down and pop the hips and then shoot over. That was perfect. Now let's go off the other leg. Like don't end with your feet on the ground. Yeah. Let's do another one. Yeah.